Autumn light filtered through the alien forest, turning the canopy into a cathedral of flame-colored leaves. Beneath it, something moved with the patience of a ghost. Each shift of motion was deliberate, calculated, a hand brushing away a fallen leaf here, a rifle barrel lowering there. The man beneath the camouflage was still as stone, wrapped in fibers and foliage that made him indistinguishable from the world around him. His breathing was slow, measured, more habit than need. The forest was alive with quiet mechanical hums, drones sweeping above, metallic footsteps crunching on damp soil. They thought they were closing in. The soldier watched them through his scope, the reticle resting calmly on a helmet's visor that glowed faintly blue. The target's movements were efficient, professional, not amateurs. These were Confederation hunters, soldiers of a galactic army that had conquered worlds older than humanity's myths. He admired their discipline even as he calculated their deaths. The crosshair drifted, not yet fired. Patience had kept him alive this long. They called him Wraith. That wasn't his birth name. It was the name whispered in the dark after missions that never officially happened. He had been part of a reconnaissance unit deployed to scout unknown systems, to find out what the wider galaxy held. The answer had been captivity, interrogation, and the death of every man and woman in his unit. They had taken him for study, a primitive organism from an unremarkable planet. The arrogance had cost them. Now he was loose on one of their frontier moons, a place of old forests and perpetual dusk. He carried a modified marksman rifle, his own weaponry forged from scavenged alien alloys, the barrel wrapped in crimson leaves. It was crude by galactic standards, yet worked perfectly in his hands. His suit blended with the terrain, a mixture of human ingenuity and stolen technology. The Confederation had sent hundreds to find him, assuming he'd flee, starve, or surrender. But Wraith had chosen the battlefield, and the forest favored him. A flicker of movement caught his eye, an aerial drone scanning the canopy. He adjusted his scope and exhaled. The suppressed shot was softer than a whisper. The drone tumbled silently through the branches, lights dying as it hit the ground. The patrol didn't notice. They were too focused on chasing signals that didn't exist. Wraith shifted position, ghosting backward through the leaves, every motion flowing from training honed over decades. He knew their pattern now. The aliens advanced in a crescent sweep, tightening the noose, confident their scanners would reveal him. But their technology wasn't built for something as ancient as patience. He'd mapped their movements over 2 days, learning where they faltered, how they trusted their machines more than their instincts. That trust would kill them. As night approached, the forest's hues deepened to rust and violet. Wraith crouched beneath a fallen trunk and checked his equipment. Ammunition was low, rations nearly gone. It didn't matter. Hunger sharpened focus. The mission wasn't to survive, it was to make them remember, to carve the lesson into their data archives. Humans were not prey. He pressed a gloved hand into the soil, feeling the cool dampness, the rhythm of life all around him. He remembered the faces of his team, Hale, Ortiz, Juno, and the promises made in whispered barracks rooms about returning home. They were gone. He would not join them until his work was finished. Through the forest, a faint echo reached him. The mechanical growl of troop carriers landing somewhere distant. Reinforcements. The hunt was intensifying. Wraith smiled behind his mask, a small, grim expression that never reached his eyes. He adjusted his rifle, found a new vantage point, and waited. The galaxy had sent armies to capture a single human. Soon they would learn the truth. Death didn't come for him. It came with him. The forest absorbed the fading light as Wraith moved along a shallow ridge, testing each foothold before shifting his weight. His senses stretched outward, not as instinctual panic, but as disciplined awareness. Every rustle, every vibration in the soil, every faint crackle of alien comm chatterbled into a mental map he updated with each careful step. He had no illusions about the danger closing in around him. The Confederation had escalated. He could feel it in the air, a tension like a storm building behind the tree line. Down below, A squad of hunters trudged through a patch of luminescent ferns, their equipment glowing softly in the gloom. The team leader's metallic exosuit pulsed with shifting tactical data, but Wraith noted how the creature's posture drooped with exhaustion. They had spent 2 relentless days pushing through terrain that fought them at every turn. They were relying on machinery for clarity, and machines had limits he understood better than they did. He crouched behind a moss-slick boulder and surveyed a cluster of natural choke points ahead. A narrow cleft between 2 massive roots, a slope where leaves slid underfoot, and a fallen log that tempted one to step over instead of around. He had shaped this landscape to work with his strategy. Small traps, silent, precise, non-explosive, lay hidden in shadows. Not designed to kill, but to slow, confuse, redirect. He needed the hunters moving where he wanted, and they were obliging with predictable obedience. A sound flickered through his earpiece, a fragment of intercepted transmission. The alien commander's voice carried a crisp authority, but beneath it was a strain he hadn't heard before. Team Theta, adjust route northeast. Pattern Wraith is confirmed. Maintain caution. He manipulates terrain. That admission almost amused him. They were learning, but slowly. Wraith shifted his rifle and observed the squad from another angle. One figure lagged behind the others, scanning upward as though expecting him to descend from the treetops. Fear had begun seeping into their ranks like groundwater. The Confederation prided itself on logic and precision, but fear was a universal phenomenon, indifferent to species. He didn't revel in their dread, but he understood its uses. Breaking morale would make what came next easier. Still, he listened closely to the commander's tone. This leader was different from the others he'd faced. Meticulous, adaptive, harder to manipulate. Wraith recognized a silhouette from earlier skirmishes, a tall figure encased in smooth armor that shimmered like wet stone. A strategist, not a brute. Their silent duel had begun even before they met face to face. He moved again, slipping between 2 tree trunks and pausing to let a pair of drones drift past overhead. Their searchlights probed the ground, but Wraith angled his body to merge with a cluster of crimson leaves. The drones passed without hesitation. Their programming favored movement, heat, and profile. Wraith provided none. Below him, the squad followed the trail he intended. The point scout nudged aside a layer of leaves and triggered a thin filament that snapped with barely a whisper. A branch shifted. A burst of spores clouded the air, harmless but disorienting. The scouts stumbled, coughing. Their formation collapsed for a moment, and Wraith marked the positions of each flailing shape. This was the moment he needed. He took aim, not at the squad, but at a smooth rock formation beside them. The suppressed shot ricocheted cleanly, echoing through the ravine at an angle that made it impossible to place. The squad reacted instantly, weapons raised, firing blindly into trees that held nothing. Their panic was controlled, but undeniable. He watched them recover, regroup, and push forward with new wariness. Good. They were starting to understand the shape of the threat. Not enough to stop him, but enough to think. Thinking would slow them. Slowing would force mistakes. Beyond the squad, a new noise emerged. The commander's unmistakable footfalls drawing nearer. Wraith steadied his breathing. Their confrontation was approaching, step by step, and he intended to choose the moment. For now, he watched the hunters advance deeper into the maze he had prepared, and he allowed himself a quiet, razor-thin smile. The forest exhaled a cold breath as the hunters pressed deeper into the ravine, their formations tightening with every cautious step. Wraith tracked their progress from a shadowed perch, observing the subtle changes in their behavior. They no longer marched with the certainty of conquerors. They moved like creatures sensing the presence of something older and more dangerous than themselves. Their helmets pivoted at every stray sound, and their fingers twitched near their triggers. Fear was no longer creeping into them. It was settling. He shifted his position slowly, letting his body mimic the sway of branches above. The commander appeared near the front of the column, his armor casting faint ripples of blue light against the crimson leaves. Wraith studied him, seeking weakness. The commander radiated discipline, but something about his stiff posture and clipped movements revealed a tension he tried to hide from his subordinates. That tension fascinated Wraith. It meant the man was calculating, noticing patterns, and feeling the wrong conclusions tug at the edges of his mind. A memory surfaced: harsh lights, steel restraints, the smell of antiseptic. Wraith saw again the Confederation scientists circling him, their voices coldly curious as they cataloged his muscles, reflexes, and pain thresholds. He had watched his team die through a reinforced glass window, powerless to intervene. Their final looks had burned themselves into him. Anger, fear, and a trust that he would find a way to make it matter. That memory had driven every moment since his escape, and it whispered now as he breathed in the forest's metallic scent. He pushed it aside. Rage had its place, but precision fueled survival. Below, one of the hunters halted abruptly, lifting a hand for silence. The squad froze. Wraith sensed their growing suspicion that the forest itself had become hostile. He understood their unease. He had long ago learned to let an environment speak for him. The creature's visor scanned the treetops, then the ground, then the spaces between. It murmured a warning into its calms, and the others tightened their grips on their weapons. The commander stepped forward and glanced around the ravine with unmistakable suspicion. His voice cut through the calm channel Wraith monitored. This pattern is deliberate. He is not running. He is funneling us. Wraith felt a pulse of satisfaction at the acknowledgement. The truth had dawned, but it was far too late. He waited until the squad resumed movement, then shifted to a crouch. His rifle rose with fluid economy, finding a glinting sensor node on one soldier's shoulder. He pulled the trigger. The shot struck the node, bursting it in a flurry of sparks that cascaded across the squad in a bright arc. They reacted instantly, dropping to cover, firing in controlled bursts at phantom threats. Wraith was already gone, drifting backward into the brush, letting their panic shape their decisions. As they advanced blindly toward the slope, he circled behind them, careful not to disturb a single leaf. His movement was so silent that even the forest seemed unaware. He positioned himself where the ravine narrowed, giving him full view of their confused formation. Their fear had matured into something sharper. The creeping realization that the human was not a fugitive at all. He was a tactician shaping their route, a hunter refining a kill. The commander barked a frustrated order, trying to restore cohesion. His controlled voice trembled ever so slightly. Wraith could almost hear the thoughts forming behind the helmet. Thoughts that mirrored the truth he had been cultivating since the first drone fell. Then the commander said the words Wraith had been waiting for, spoken more to himself than to his soldiers. We are not pursuing him. We are being reduced. Wraith exhaled a slow breath. The acknowledgement marked a turning point. They finally understood what hunted them, but understanding did not equal survival. He stepped back into the darkness, leaving only silence behind. The climax was approaching, and he intended to shape it on his terms. The first tremor of conflict began as a faint vibration beneath Wraith's boots, a signal carried through the roots of ancient trees. The remaining hunters were moving quickly now, abandoning the slow, deliberate advance they had practiced for days. Panic had distilled their caution into desperation. Wraith watched from a cluster of high branches, his silhouette blended into the mottled canopy, as the squad spilled into a clearing littered with fallen leaves that glowed like embers. Their breathing was sharp, almost erratic, and even their disciplined commander betrayed hurried movements that disrupted the usual precision of his stance. Wraith steadied his rifle, not yet aiming to kill, but to shape what remained of the battlefield. He fired once into a distant trunk, sending a crack that ricocheted unnaturally along the clearing's natural contours. The sound fractured their cohesion. One soldier scrambled behind a boulder, while another took cover behind exposed roots. Their fear had reached its apex, and Wraith knew that was the moment when control shifted irrevocably to him. The commander raised a clenched fist, halting the squad, and surveyed the trees with perceptive eyes. Wraith admired his resolve. Despite his frayed confidence, The commander still sought logic in the chaos. "He is near," the alien murmured, his voice taut with grudging respect. "Hold position. Do not fire blindly." Wraith moved with the precision of flowing water, descending to ground level without sound. He slipped between shadows, rifle angled low, watching as the hunters gathered their courage. Their shoulders trembled, their breath fogged the air, and their once perfect formation was now a patchwork of uncertainty. He understood fear intimately. It had nearly consumed him during captivity, but he had carved that weakness out of himself. These soldiers had never been forced to. He approached from their left flank, pausing behind a tree broad enough to conceal him completely. From this angle, he could see the commander's guarded stance and the remaining soldiers forming a loose perimeter. He sighted the communication officer first. Eliminating the node would plunge them into isolation. A single shot flickered from his suppressor, hitting the officer's comm module with surgical precision. Sparks burst outward, and the soldier collapsed as though yanked from balance by invisible hands. The squad erupted. Some shouted warnings. Others attempted to re-establish comm links, but the commander's voice cut sharply through their panic. "He's forcing close engagement. Prepare for contact." Wraith didn't give them the chance. He burst from cover, moving with startling speed, his rifle snapping twice in rapid succession. 2 hunters dropped before they could raise their weapons. Another lunged at him, but Wraith sidestepped, striking the creature's throat with brutal efficiency. The alien crashed into the leaves, gasping for breath it would never reclaim. Only the commander remained. He stepped forward slowly, lowering his rifle in a gesture that was not surrender, but challenge. His armor glinted under the muted light as he studied Wraith, perhaps trying to understand how a single human had undone an entire battalion. "Your kind was underestimated," he admitted, voice somber. "We believed you were fragile." Wraith held his silence. Words held no value here. The commander charged, swift and fluid, but Wraith was already in motion. Their struggle was brief, metal against fabric, blade against gauntlet, instinct against calculation. Wraith redirected the commander's strike, seized his arm, and drove the alien's own blade beneath the segmented plates of his armor. The commander staggered, staring at him with something like awe before collapsing into the glowing leaves. The forest fell still. Wraith stepped back, chest rising with controlled breaths, and surveyed the clearing for movement. None remained. The silence felt heavy, not with dread, but with resolution. He retrieved what equipment he could salvage, then activated a stolen beacon, its signal piercing the sky with a thin line of blue. A ship would come, friend or foe. He could not yet know. But whatever descended through the atmosphere, he would meet it with the same intent that had carried him through the hunt. He faded into the forest's shadows once more, prepared for whatever came next.